Welcome back to the first episode of the Yes Series podcast. This is brought to you by the Hunter Brooks Watson Fund. Yes actually stands for the Young Entrepreneurs Series, and that's exactly what we are hoping to bring you. We have some motivating and inspirational stories from past grant winners and young entrepreneurs and innovators out there looking to make a difference. Today joining us, we have Cassie and Matt. How are you guys doing today?
We're good. How are you, Jacob?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be sitting down with you guys. For those of you just joining us, you don't know this, but I'm actually a past grant winner. So it's great to have all three of us combined, and I'm definitely happy for the opportunity to get to do this. Obviously, we have two guests. We've got Cassie and Matt. So what I want to know is, how did you guys meet? Cassie, I'll let you take the lead on that one.
Yeah. So Matt and I both went to school at Syracuse University, and we were both in the marching band. And through the marching band, there is like a service fraternity called Kappa Kappa Psi, and both of us were rushing it at the same time, and we got to know each other because we were in that same rush class.
And how did you find out about this grant? And then we'll get into what it is you guys are doing.
We found out about this grant from a professor that both of us had, and he actually was the one that really pushed both of us to start Capricious Productions. He sent me a text one day and he was like, "Have you heard of Hunter's Grant?" And I was like, "No, I don't know what that is." And he was like, "Okay, I'm going to call you and tell you all about it." And he called me and he was like, "You need to fill this out. I'll start writing you a recommendation letter right now because you're going to fill this out."
That's so cool. So what was the company that you guys had started then?
So the company we've started is called Capricious Productions. What we are is sort of a mishmash of everything. We are part record label, part recording studio, artist, everything essentially. So we find artists that we like. We try to work with them on smaller projects, such as mixing and mastering singles for them, or helping them record singles or EPs, smaller projects so that we can get to know them. And then if we feel that our values align with theirs and their values align with us, and we work very well and very cohesively as a team, we have a label that we'd like to sign them to. And through that label, we do all of the regular label things, but we try to make it more fair and more transparent to our artists. So we'll sit down with them and go through every single portion of their contract, and their contracts are very short. So one of our artists could only do, I believe it was like 6 or 7 months. And within that 6 or 7 months, we were willing to work with them to do whatever they wanted. Whereas if they went to like, any big traditional corporate label, that was never going to fly. And we try really hard to educate artists that we work with on all of the little pieces and parts that go into having a recording contract, because it's really hard for artists and it's really scary if you don't know what you're doing. So we try to make that process as helpful as possible and as educational as possible.
One of the things that I want to jump into is, you first said that you identified your values, and that if your client's values are in alignment with yours, then you guys can work well and cohesively together. I think that's something a lot of people don't ever consider. How did you come up with what your guys' values are, and what are they?
So I can talk a little bit about that. It's a little bit of openness and truthfulness. We look for people who are genuinely themselves, and especially when you're working with artists, you want somebody who is truthful to themselves and sort of their image and what they want their art to be, because those are the most genuine people to work with. Beyond that, just someone who, is easy to communicate with, someone who's easy to have a conversation with, and people who we believe want sort of the same things that we do in terms of like more fairness and more equity and more justice for artists in the music industry as a whole.
And Matt, one of the things that you said was fairness. Cassie, you mentioned earlier transparency. What I'm on is, why are you guys bringing up those words? What is the actual issue that there currently is in this industry?
Yeah, so I know that everybody's sort of heard bits and pieces of the Taylor Swift Scooter Braun case, and that's really worst case scenario, where a young woman who's very talented was picked up. She was not really put in a position where everything was explained to her in regards of her recording contract and her publishing contract. And it ended up that, you know, she became Taylor Swift. She's like one of the biggest musicians in the world. And now she doesn't own, you know, the first 3 or 4 albums that she wrote. That is really what we want to avoid in the music industry, because, you know, we're hearing about this because it's Taylor Swift, but this happens to so many artists and so many bands. And it seems very obvious to me. And, you know, I know this probably sounds very naive to somebody a little bit more experienced in the music industry, but it just makes sense to work together and to be good to people and to put good energy into the world, because, you know, like Scooter Braun is now facing all of this backlash for owning Taylor Swift's discography and not giving it back to her. We don't want that to happen to other people. We want to help educate people on what they're giving away. And if they decide that they want to give away their music and that somebody else can own it and that's better for the life of the music, then that's fine. But the problem is that so many people don't understand it, and you get really caught up in like, oh my gosh, this is such a cool job, this is such a cool opportunity, that you don't ever think about it until something goes wrong.
Yeah, and to sort of, you know, Taylor Swift is a great example, but even like smaller, more independent artists, which there are a lot of, you know, in order for them to sign to, like as I said before, a more corporate label, I mean, they get these contracts that are like 50 pages long and written in lawyerese and so hard to understand. And then, you know, they'll be locked into like 3-year contracts or 3-album contracts. And by the second album, they see a very small percentage of the actual money that comes in from their art that they've created. And when, you know, when they realize that and go to their label and say, hey, like I kind of thought I'd be making more off of my work, they say, well, you know, it's in the contract, like all this stuff, all this merchandise, all these extra sales, all these ticket sales and stuff, like we get like sometimes 80 to 90% of that, and then you get what's left, streaming royalties, everything like that. And we not only do we give a significantly larger portion to the artists in our contract, but we also sit with them and go through every single point of the contract and make sure that they understand what they're getting into before we sign anything. So that part of it is very important to us, because it's really hard for smaller artists who maybe can't get good legal representation or don't know, they're younger and they don't know exactly what they're looking at. It's important for us that they know what's going on before they.
In those contracts, I'm sure there's a bunch of technical jargon, like you said, it's lawyerese. And so, you know, number one, kudos to you guys for doing something to solve and work against this issue. Number two, though, where did you guys learn how to quote read the lawyerese or to sit down and to actually explain what's going on? Because I can imagine some of it could be confusing for anyone really. But how did you guys get in a place where you're able to sit down and explain it word for word to your clients?
I think both of us got very, very lucky with the educations that we were able to get. So like I said, both of us went to Syracuse University. I got a bachelor's degree from there, and I had so my bachelor's was a Bachelor of Science in television, radio, and film, actually. And I got a minor in music industry. And throughout both of those programs, I really learned a ton about law as it relates to the entertainment industry. And then that music industry minor really, really focused on each of these different parts of a contract. So I remember being like a sophomore in college, and we had to split up into teams in one of my classes, and one team was the record label and one team was the artist, and you had to battle out these negotiations in front of, you know, a professor who has been in the industry for 30 years. So that was my experience with it. And then Matt and I were naturally just interested in the same thing. So, you know, oftentimes we would be learning about the same things around the same time, and we would go home and kind of talk to each other about it and be like, oh my God, can you like believe this? Like Matt is probably better versed to talk about this, but both of us are kind of like nerds in the entertainment law area.
Yeah, I also went to Syracuse, obviously. I got my bachelor's there on like a pre-law track. And then I got my master's in audio arts, which was a combination of music business classes and audio engineering. And in the course of that, I did a lot of those same activities, and I read a lot of contracts and learned about the ins and outs of the music business. And as the person who writes a lot of the contracts, I've had to like learn a lot, and I've had to go review like real music contracts and like figure out like what works and what doesn't work. And I definitely don't hold a law degree, but I know a lot about music recording contracts from all the work that we've done, making ours more improved.
Lucky as well to have the professors that we had at SU. So one of the people that taught us at SU, he is actually a New York City lawyer. So he's somebody that we'll go to and we'll send him the contract and be like, hey, does this make sense? Is this real? Can you just like give this like the A-OK? And we're also very lucky with our network outside of that. I've worked with an artist or two who have more of those corporate contracts, and they have been nice enough to share what those corporate contracts look like with me, so we can kind of compare our contract to what a bigger label is doing.
What step are you in the process? Are you a full record, like you get the deal, you can get the musician the record deal, and you guys can get them to the label as well, and you guys do everything from mixing the beats, getting them in the studio, and then connecting them with the person at the record label? Or where are you guys in the process?
We're a little bit of everywhere. So when one of our artists comes to us that we have signed and we have this, recording contract all figured out with them already, they'll come to us and they'll say, okay, I want to do this single. This is what it's like now. And I'll help them out with lyrics. And then Matt and I will kind of work together to build a beat with them, or, if they're not local to us, and especially with COVID restrictions and travel restrictions right now, we've been working to find recording studios in their area with some of our other friends who in turn kind of help them build the song. And it becomes this huge collaborative project. So once their song is recorded, in whatever form that takes, and that is a little bit different for every artist we work with, we get the song back, we mix it ourselves, we master it ourselves, and then we do all of the promotional work around it and all of the merchandising work around it, if that's something that we're going forth with.
Wow, so you guys are like a one-stop shop, like you're just that central hub.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And ultimately, we'd like to add the other aspects of that too. Like right now, it's sort of just that, but we'd like to eventually add like a fully operational recording studio, and as well as a venue, so that like the artist can come to us for a place to play, a place to record, and a place to sign if they so choose to do that. Sort of to have it all under the one umbrella and make it easy for them.
And you guys won the grant, and obviously with that comes a little bit of money. So what is that money being put towards to help you guys get closer to this ultimate end goal that you have?
Right now, we're focused on getting more recording equipment and getting like some soundproofing stuff to really help out the home recording studio that we have right now.
Awesome. So what down the road, you're at the end of the road, it's been 10, 15, 20 years from now. What do you guys want this to look like? What do you want it to turn into?
Matt, I'll let you go first on that one.
For me, I would like to see it expand to have a lot more reach, like at least nationwide, if not worldwide, in terms of the places that the artists are coming from. And I would like to see us have, like I said before, a fully operational recording studio with like a traditional big mixing board and a big control room, maybe a few, and a venue that, doubles as a stage, a club or whatever, all of it consolidated together and operating well. And ultimately, like beyond just having that as our company, I want our values to be rippling through the music industry. Like that to me is more important than like, any profits or whatever. Like that I don't really care so much about. I care more about people in the industry seeing that you can do things for artists and it works, and having that sort of ripple out and affect other labels and other areas of the music industry as well. To me, that's the most important thing.
I've seen that you have a client now. You've had one client, or has there been more in the process this far?
4 signed artists, but we have multiple clients that we do like mixing and mastering and recording services for that are not contracted.
Awesome. So you have 4 on contract. How did you get them? How did you get a record label involved with this? Because obviously, anyone can start something like this, in their backyard, but to actually get momentum, get clients signed, get everything else, is a whole nother journey. How did you guys go from this being a dorm room operation to now you actually have people signing contracts?
Yeah. So when this started, in the very, very early stages, I was telling a professor that this is my huge goal. Like, this is what I'm going to be doing. And he was like, okay, well, you don't get to say that you're going to be doing this in 10, 15 years. Like, that's not true. If you want to be doing it, you'll be doing it now. And I was like, what do you mean? How am I supposed to do something like this? And he was like, you'll find an opportunity and you will make a record label happen if that's what you want to happen. And he actually told me that I wasn't allowed to come back to his office for any more meetings until I had like started this record label. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, I need him to sign this form. Like, I can't, oh no. So I was sitting in class one day and our first artist, Jill with the G, texted me, and we had been working together as a producer and artist for I think like 4 years at that point. And she texted me and she was like, hey, this on-campus record label reached out to me and they want to sign me. And like, I don't know, I feel kind of weird about it because I don't know anybody in there. And I was sitting in class typing this message out and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty weird. And then it hit me and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the opportunity that he was talking about. And I was like, I have kind of a crazy idea, but maybe you're into it. I don't know. So I was like, do you want to maybe like help me see if this dream works? And she was like, oh my God, yeah. So we started with her. And then shortly after that, we started reaching out to other artists that were our friends as well. And we were kind of like, hey, this is like the idea we have here. These are our big goals. Do you want to like try this crazy thing with us? And that was really like how we built up our first 3 artists, and our current artist, Caitlin Berry, our 4th artist. Matt, you can tell the story of how we got Caitlin signed.
I mean, obviously, we've been very lucky to have a pretty extensive network of friends who are musicians and people in the musical world that we've been able to sort of connect with. But sometimes it's just like right place, right time. So I was working at Guitar Center at one point, and this girl came in with her parents to buy a keyboard, and I worked in the pro audio section, so I was in charge of the keyboards, and she wanted to test them out, so I set it up for her to test with a microphone so she could sing, and she started singing, and I was like, oh my God, she's really good. So I was just like, hey, here's my card, basically, like if you're ever interested in like checking us out or like see if we can do some recording for you or whatever, we'd love to do that. And it's just sort of grown from there, and that relationship has expanded, and now she's a signed artist. I mean, it's like, it helps to have connections, but sometimes you just have to take the opportunities when they arise.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, create an opportunity as well, because you didn't just sit there thinking, man, she's good, well, I hope she does well. No, you actually went up to her, gave her the business card, whether that's metaphorically or literally, and you created that opportunity yourself. Yeah,
definitely.
So obviously we're talking about all the fun aspects of this, but what about the tiring aspects, the pain in the butts, the headaches? What has been the biggest struggle you guys have had?
I'm sure we've each had separate, different, unique struggles. So
honestly, I feel like last week might have been my biggest struggle. So our artist Caitlin Berry has a single coming out, and as I was saying, like I work with her, I change her lyrics around if need be, and we had recorded this song with some of our friends in Syracuse. So we were like constantly on Zoom calls while they were in recording sessions. We were we were mixing the song by ourselves, we were mastering the song by ourselves, and we were like, okay, what else do we need to like think about? And we were like, okay, we have to get her an album cover. And I have a habit of saying like, oh yeah, I can like figure out how to do this thing, even if I have no idea how to do the thing, because I think it sounds cool. So I was like, oh yeah, I can make an album cover. That's easy. So literally all last week was finishing up like the final master of her song, and working like my full-time day job and learning how to make an album cover while also doing like all of our social media presence and like trying to keep everything a secret, but also like get her up to date on like how we're going to do the announcements. And she was also coming out with a t-shirt at the same time, so I was like putting together the designs for this t-shirt. And I literally was spending like 14 hours a day probably working like just nonstop, all Capricious all the time. I would be at work and somebody like my boss would give me a call or something, and they would be like, hey, how's this thing coming? And I would just be like, oh, I don't know, like I just like can't focus today. And then I would kind of like say something to like get them to leave me alone for a little bit longer, and then I would be like, okay, back to like mastering this single or back to putting this album cover together. And that was just like the entirety of last week, and I'm so exhausted from it now.
Yeah, mine is definitely a lot less interesting of an answer. But for me, it's the it's two things. It's the hurdles that you kind of have to go through to establish a business, like in terms of setting it up and establishing it in a state and dealing with paperwork and you know registrations and things like that, and making sure that all the ducks are in a row there. I mean, it's not difficult necessarily, but it's dry. Like it's real boring, and that's okay. It should be like regulated and make sure that everything is okay. But it's definitely a slog to get through. And then probably after that would be just the hardest thing for me so far has been dealing with the impact of COVID, when it first happened, because we were at that point, we had 3 artists signed, and we were like courting 2 others and like trying to figure out, okay, like we're in a pretty good place. And then all of a sudden it was like everything stops, everything shuts down. And we're absolutely not unique in that regard, where, we had something impacted severely by that. And, we're lucky that we were able to ride the storm, but figuring that out and adapting to that was definitely a pretty significant challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I've done a lot of interviews in the past, the thing that people don't realize when they say they want to start a business or they have this big dream they're chasing, all they're picturing is that end result of that beautiful studio with, your giant rap artist or whatever music artist you got in there with you. But they forget about all of the paperwork, the 14-hour days, the difficult struggle of it, really. So I commend you guys for just going through that and just tackling it, where a lot of people would have just thrown their hands up and said, nope, that's it.
Yeah, and I don't want to like scare anybody away if they're listening to this and thinking about starting a business. Like it's doable, it really is, but it's just something that you have to do. And keeping track of finances and stuff like that, it's dry and boring, but it's important. But you can do it, basically.
Absolutely. So as we start to wrap this up, I'm gonna give both of you the opportunity here to just give some final words. It can be encouragement, it can be sharing another aspect of your story, just some final words that you guys wanna let go here.
I think my final words to anybody thinking about getting into the music industry or any entertainment industry, I should say, or somebody that just wants to dive a little bit deeper into the entertainment industry, is to not be deterred by the amount of people that are going to tell you it's not plausible, it's not easy, it's really difficult, you have to be 1 in a million to be in this space, and that you have to be really exceptionally good at one thing. I have heard the same pieces of advice so many times of, it would just be easier to quit. It would be easier to get an office job doing something that was, bearable. But I really, really recommend that you don't give yourself an out. You don't give yourself a plan B. You go and forge your own path with whatever that is you want to do, or whatever multiple things you want to do. There's a big stigma within the entertainment industry that you have to stay in one lane. You have to be a record label. You have to be a recording studio. I don't think you have to be any one thing. I think you can really make your own adventure.
Yeah, and sort of going along those same lines, you know, if you have an idea or if you want to be something, like just do it. Just if you want to be a musician, just record a crappy song on your voice memo and just like start there. Like, you know, your first whatever is not going to be the best. And you have to like keep grinding to get to the place you want to be, but you'll get there faster than you might think if you just start. And I think that's I mean, it's really cliche to say it, but like starting is the biggest hurdle. So like if you have an idea or a dream, like if you start on it as soon as you can, you're going to be that much farther in than if you start tomorrow or a year from now or what have you. So don't get discouraged, like Cassie said, and just start doing what you want to do.
I couldn't agree more. Getting started is just so important. I mean, you can either sit there or you can trip, fall, stumble. It just, as long as you're moving forward and you're falling forward and you're getting back up and keep going, that's the most important part. You're going to be ahead of the person who never even started. I want to give you guys the opportunity to share out, where can we find your business online? Where are you on social media?
Yeah, so we have a website, www.capriciousmusic.com, and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, all under Capricious Productions.
Awesome. Cassie, Matt, it's been great to have you.
Thanks so much, Jacob.
Thank you so much, Jacob.